Hello everyone, back tuning in to today's second video. So I've already done the spring forecast. You can find the video to that here on the homepage. Just scroll down and it's underneath the link ads. Later on, the spring forecast will be placed on the spring forecast page. There'll be a written post that goes with it. So if you can't watch video all in one go, it will be kept at the website indefinitely. You can come back and look at it whenever you want. And read written summary about the spring forecast as well. Later on this afternoon, probably around 4 or 5 o'clock, there'll be a sneak peek for the summer, because now that the spring forecast is out of the way, now we've got spring out of the way, the long range bandwagon is rolling on to the next season, and that's going to be the spring. So from March, all of the spring updates in terms of seasonal models of the analogues will begin, and we build up to the summer forecast that's released at the end of May. So little sneak peek for summer later on this afternoon. But this is the Sunday Roundup, so we're going to be having a look at various things. We'll have a look at the latest storm that's just been named by the Irish Met Office, Storm Euing. We'll be having a look at whether next week to 10 days looks very unsettled, and we'll be having a look at the GWV solar tracker and the Arctic and North Atlantic oscillations as well, so quite like to cram in, and I'll get on with it in a second. Before I get on with that, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on the page. You just have to browse widgets, click through links, you get a help us page website. Thanks so much for doing that. There's also video ads for those pages which own that content. When you watch them, they close back up again, or you can close them back up again after you've watched them. It does help to pay for GWV.com. So, getting on with today's second video, the Sunday Roundup. This is the latest named storm, this deep area of low pressure to the northwest of Scotland. That is Storm Euing. It's going to be bringing quite a lot of rain across the country through the next few hours, and the strongest of the winds with this one are in the north and the west. So, particularly for Ireland, I think could be seeing gusts of wind up to 70 miles an hour. Also for parts of southern Scotland, gusts of wind up to 50, 60 miles an hour. Probably coming down to northwest England and North Wales as well. It isn't going to be as bad as we had it with Storm Doris, but even so, it's going to give quite a blow to the north and the west, and just generally wet and windy weather further south and east during the course of this afternoon and into this evening and overnight. This is the latest radar picture from the Weather Outlook, showing me the rain with Storm Euing at the moment. It's all in the north and west, particularly across Ireland, very wet there. Also some heavy rain coming into northwestern parts of England and stretching up to western Scotland as well. It's mostly dry further south and east. This rain will be getting its act together and moving south and east during the course of today. These are the severe weather warnings that have been issued by the UK Met Office. So there's an amber alert here for Scotland, parts of northwestern England, down the Irish Sea into North Wales as well. So you get the idea that it's very much in the north and west, as opposed to what we had with Doris, which was much further southwards. But nevertheless, for the north and west, does look pretty significant. All the warnings today are for wind. I think for rain yet, there might be some warnings appearing later on for rain. The amber warning is a be aware warning, or I should say the yellow warning is a be aware warning. The amber warning is be prepared, and the red warning, which you very rarely see, is take action. So it's the lowest level of warning from the UK Met, but nevertheless it still looks quite a significantly windy day, particularly later on this afternoon into this evening up in the north and west. So you're going to be travelling about anywhere in this yellow area. Do take care. We don't issue severe weather warnings at GWV because we're not qualified to do that. So always, if you're concerned about the weather, if you need to travel or whatnot, and you want advice, do go to the UK Met Office. We link to the severe weather warnings at the UK Met Office on GWV's homepage, so you can get there very easily. Do check out the warnings if you need to. Right, getting on with the rest of the video. This is the GWV's winter season daily solar activity tracker. This has been updated by our good friend James Ackwell. As always, every week we have a look at what solar activity is doing. We are trending down with solar activity, but back in the middle and latter part of January, we actually had a bit of a spike in sunspot numbers just there, and actually it's big enough to lift up the trend lines, which is the thick green and thick red line. But the latest is that we are trending back downwards again. Those trend lines are moving downwards. And as I said, we're moving into solar minimum. We won't arrive at true solar minimum until around the end of 2018, probably. But we're going to be trending down with these sunspot numbers over the next 2 or 3 years. That is the very latest where we was yesterday on Saturday, that red spot there. So you see that there is continuing to be sunspots on the solar disk, but they are at a much lower level compared to what they were a couple of years ago when we reached solar maximum, and the trend is very much down in sunspot activity. Latest in the stratosphere, this is the temperature at 10 HPA over the North Pole from the JMA, Japanese Meteorological Agency. We've had another bit of a warming. That's where we went with the stratospheric warming that occurred at the end of January and start of February. Then we dropped back down towards average. The grey line here is the average temperature at 10 HPA over the North Pole. So after that warming that occurred at the end of January and start of February, we moved downwards with those temperatures at 10 HPA. The latest, though, is that relative temperatures up. We haven't gone back to where we was at the end of January and start of February, but we have had another fairly pronounced stratospheric warming at 10 HPA. Although, of course, at this time of year, you would expect the temperature to be lifting up. You see that the grey line of trend is very much to start warming things up now. We are well past the shortest day, which occurred at the end of December. So the trend is to start to lift those temperatures up at 10 HPA over the North Pole until we reach our peak at some point in the mid or late summer. Again, this warming is quite significant that we've had over the stratosphere over the North Pole, but it doesn't yet, constitute a sudden stratospheric warming, which is very strictly defined. This is a bit lower down at 30 HPA, and again, warming has occurred. Again, you see that very significant warming that happened at the start of February. Then we dropped the temperature down through the early part of February, and the latest is that we've lifted the temperature back up again, not going back to the level that we did at the start of February, but nevertheless, another fairly significant warming has taken place in the stratosphere over North Pole at 10 HPA, but not a stratospheric warming. And to get a stratospheric warming, we need to get a reversal of the zonal winds at 10 HPA and also at 30 HPA. And we haven't done that. You can see that we got very close to it. This is from the University of Berlin, based on the ECMWF model. Got very close to reversing the zonal winds at the start of February, just there. Almost did it, but just not quite enough, I don't think, to impact the troposphere, anyway, to impact the boundary of the atmosphere weather is taking place. And the latest is that we're around here again at 10 and 30 HPA. 10 HPA is represented by the blue line, 30 HPA represented by the red line. So again, we're very close to reversing the winds. You notice that at 10 HPA. Very close to getting the westerly zone of winds going easterly, but just not quite managing to do it. And the forecast, which is the grey lines at the end, is that we actually won't reverse those winds at 30 or at 10 HPA. So the zone of winds continue at a weaker level. We're back around where we was in November, actually, when the winds were quite weak in the stratosphere, the zonal winds, they were quite weak then. Then they really took off through December and January up here. And so we're back where we was with fairly weak zonal winds, which does allow the possibility of some high pressure to the north. And I'm going to show you the charts for the next week to 10 days in a moment. You will see that high pressure is trying to get going to the north, and that is because the zonal winds are weaker, but not really reducing to enough to allow a proper sort of northern blocking feature to set in. Been a very unusual season, this, in terms of these warmings that have been occurring in the stratosphere. They have been quite significant, especially that one at the end of January and the start of February, but just not quite enough to really start impacting the troposphere with very strong northern blocking. This is GFS temperature forecast for 10 HPA over the North Pole. There's the warming that we've got right now. So you see it is a significant warming that's occurring over the stratosphere again at the moment. Not quite reaching the level that we got to at the end of January and start of February, but another really quite significant warming. We run through the next few days and we find the temperature easing off. You can't sustain those sort of that sort of level of temperature. You can't sustain that all that long in the stratosphere, so we start to see the temperature cooling back down again, but not going back to a particularly cold stratosphere at all, just gradually reducing the temperature at 10 HPA over the North Pole. This takes into the extended range of the GFS. This is meteosil.fr, by the way. You can find the link to Meteosil on the links page. And you see that, again, we do cool things down gradually over the North Pole at 10 HPA, but not going back into a very cold stratosphere. It's too late in the season now to get a really cold stratosphere. The trend, of course, is to warm the temperature up at 10 HPA from now through to the summer. So, yes, it does cool down, but not going back to a very cold stratospheric temperature. This is the Arctic Oscillation observed and forecast chart. So the black line here tells us where the Arctic Oscillation has been. The red lines where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. Remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere. It doesn't drive anything. It just tells you what the atmosphere is doing. When the Arctic Oscillation is positive, it tells you that you've got low pressure over the pole, and consequently you've got a stronger zonal westerly flow through the Atlantic and into Europe. Conversely, when the Arctic Oscillation goes negative, you've usually got high pressure over the pole, and that means you've got low pressure underneath it, typically through the Atlantic and into Europe. And it's a cold signal, essentially a negative Arctic Oscillation, as you push the cold air out of the pole into mid latitudes via the blocking. So, for most of the winter, actually, the Arctic Oscillation has been in a positive phase. We did go negative with the AO through the early part of February, exactly around the time that we had that sudden stratospheric warming. Didn't quite, I don't think, reach the level of a sudden stratospheric warming, but it was a fairly significant warming that occurred at 10 HPA. And so around that time, the Arctic Oscillation did trend down into negative territory. Whether that was a response to the stratospheric warming, we'll never know. Probably it wasn't. It's probably just coincidence. But it did occur at exactly the time that the warming in the stratosphere was taking place. The second half of February, we've seen the Arctic Oscillation lifting up again, so we're currently very positive. That's where we are right now. The trend of the GFS ensembles is to move the Arctic Oscillation back down into negative territory for a time, but then to lift it back up into positive territory again. So this shows us that we're trying to get high pressure going to the north through this period of early March, but probably it's going to be fairly weak, and it's probably going to return back to high pressure. It's probably going to return back to low pressure, I should say, over the pole quite quickly. But we are trying to get a little bit of high pressure through early March going to the north. The North Atlantic Oscillation observed in the forecast chart looks like this. Again, throughout the winter, the North Atlantic Oscillation has generally been trending positive. We are still positive with the North Atlantic Oscillation, although it is reducing, possibly going negative through into early March. Again, remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere. This time it's in the North Atlantic as opposed to the Arctic. Just an index that's reflecting what the atmosphere is doing. When the North Atlantic Oscillation is positive, it's a signal for mild weather. You'll usually have low pressure around Iceland and high pressure in the Azores. When the North Atlantic Oscillation is negative, it's a colder signal. You usually have high pressure around Iceland and low pressure into the Azores. So it's a reversal, if you like, of what we get when we have a positive NAO. We are seeing the NAO reducing then within the GFS ensembles to neutral or negative, not strongly negative territory, but it does indicate that the weather patterns are going rather unusual as we go through into the early part of March. You're going to see that in a moment when I show you the charts we've got coming up for the next week to 10 days. GFS ensembles looking like this for the next couple of weeks. The red line here is the 30-year temperature average in terms of the upper air temperatures, we're milder than average today. We're going to go a bit cooler than average in the coming week, running up towards the start of March. And then it looks like we're just sticking around the seasonal average, really, through the first week of March. Nothing particularly dramatic taking place. As we get through into the second week of March, this period just here, we have got a few cold outlier members, so still the potential to turn things a little bit colder. But overall, it looks like temperatures are going to be remaining quite close to average in the next week to 10 days after a very mild start, of course. Northern areas will be a little bit colder, I think, than southern parts of the country. This is the ensemble for London. So this is how things are looking with the GFS for Thursday, and it looks a very unsettled scene. Now, this is the high pressure that we've got trying to get going up to the north. These green and blue colours up here. It's a weak ridge that's building up there. This might be the response to the stratospheric warming that occurred at the end of January and inside of February. This might be it. And whilst it's not significant northern blocking, it is a pronounced increase in pressure over Greenland and extending up towards the North Pole that we are seeing there. So it would tie in with a stratospheric warming that didn't reverse the winds. It didn't reverse the zone of westerlies and turn them easterly, and it would tie in with a stratospheric warming that was quite significant but didn't reach the level of a sudden stratospheric warming, or didn't really reach the level of a sudden stratospheric warming. So that might be the response to the warming that occurred about a month ago. For us, it just looks like it's pushing these areas of low pressure southwards, so it does imply that we're in for quite a lot of rain, quite a lot of wind around these areas of low pressure, which are complex areas of low pressure, will make for quite difficult forecasting over the next week to 10 days. We move into Friday. This area of low pressure coming up from the southwest, and again that could be bringing up a lot of heavy rain on Friday into southern and western parts of the country. That low pressure sitting around the country there on Saturday, looking very unsettled. Again, it's further south than you would normally expect, so it's not centering around Iceland. Normally the low pressure would be there. Actually, around Iceland, we're close to this weak ridge that's getting going. So you see why the NAO and the AO, why both indexes are going down towards negative territory as we go through the early part of March, why their forecasts go down into negative territory through the early part of March. But this blocking is not enough to lock us into a truly cold pattern. All it's doing is forcing these low pressures south and probably making us even wetter. We go through into Sunday, and again looks very unsettled, and then into the start of next week. So this is Monday the 6th of March, when that first area of low pressure cleared away, but got more low pressure waiting in the Atlantic, and that's just moving through as we go up to day 10, which is Wednesday the 8th of March. We're still very unsettled, still reasonably high pressure to the north, but not a proper blocking feature, and for us it's just these areas of low pressure that are dominating weather, bringing quite a lot of rain and some wind. This is the East WF, which is all very similar. So for the end of the week, it looks really unsettled with low pressure close to the country, further south than you would normally expect. This is very close to getting into a cold pattern on Saturday the 4th of March. We've got the weak ridge here around Iceland. We've got this low pressure coming up from the southwest. We've got quite a lot of cold air across Scandinavia as well. So all it would take is to move this low pressure in that sort of direction, and we would start to pull the wind in from the northeast, very close to turning things cold. And actually for northern parts of the country, across Scotland, particularly northern Scotland, we're on the cold side of these areas of low pressure. There could even there be snow at times, actually, over the next week or so. But you see that we just don't quite get into that east-northeasterly. Actually, it's just these areas of low pressure that continue to move in across the country. This is for Sunday the 5th, a week away, and again looks very, very unsettled. There'd be quite a lot of heavy rain with that, and we continue with this really unsettled weather through into the following week. This is Tuesday 7th of March, when low pressure is over top of the country, bringing a bit of a deluge, I would have thought. Lots of heavy rain coming through with that. We end up on day 10 trying to get a bit of a ridge going across Scandinavia again, but still lots of low pressure in the Atlantic. And I think any ridge that does try to form over here is going to quite quickly be broken down by these troughs and areas of low pressure that we've got in the Atlantic. So it does look quite a wet week to 10 days coming up. This is the 10-day accumulated precipitation chart from the Weather Outlook. This is based on the GFS model. It's not too alarming, actually. Western areas does look very wet, so we're between around 60 and 80 millimetres across western parts of the country. For eastern areas, it's not too bad. Around 20 to 40 millimetres is the total precipitation accumulation there through central and eastern parts. So it's a fairly wet spell, but it's not anything to be overly alarmed about for the east. It is a bit wetter in the west, and some of these western areas going up to 80, possibly 100 millimetres of rain in 10 days. That's quite significant, so there might be a little bit of flooding in the west. But at the moment, for central eastern areas, doesn't look too alarming. But this is a very unsettled pattern that we're going into, and that's just based on the midnight run of the GFS. It might be that other GFS runs will really ramp up the rainfall a lot more, because it is a very unsettled pattern with these low pressures on an unusually southerly track. March tends to be one of our drier months of the year, so it's quite unusual to get a wet March. It looks like that's what we're going into, certainly the first half of the month anyway. So that rounds everything up for our Sunday round. I hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to check out the spring forecast if you haven't yet done so. And later on this afternoon, we'll have that sneak peek for the summer. Right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.